Namaste, students. Let us continue with Act 5, Scene 1, Explanation Part 5 of The Tempest. We had stopped at a point where uh, Prospero met Alonso and Gonzalo, and of course, Sebastian and Antonio, and he spoke to Alonso. He addresses Alonso as the king and tells him that he's alive and he's the living prince on the island. So we had stopped at that point. Alonso was utterly shocked and in disbelief when he saw Prospero alive. So the last part of the previous video was when Alonso had asked Prospero of how did he reach the island alive. But Prospero, instead of replying to Alonso's query, turns to Gonzalo because, as we know, Prospero's heart, he was disheartened for Gonzalo. So he turns to Gonzalo and says, "First, noble friend, let me embrace thine age." So he is respecting Gonzalo here for his age and also for being an honorable man. He says, "Noble friend, let me embrace thine age." So he embraces Gonzalo as well, whose honor cannot be measured or confined. He says that Gonzalo's honor is immeasurable and cannot be confined. It's boundless. He has true and high respect for Gonzalo, and that is what he's expressing to him, Gonzalo. "Whether this be or be not, I'll not swear. I cannot promise what I'm seeing is going to be true or not." This is certainly the after effect of the banquet scene and the frenzy under which they were all in. So he does not know whether Prospero is really in front of him or not. Prospero, you do yet taste some subtleties of the island. So he is not blaming Gonzalo. He says this is natural. You do feel you are undergoing the delusions of this island, all that you have experienced on this island. Subtleties here means uncanny characteristics, unusual, mysterious, untrue characteristics of this island that will not let you believe things certain, that will not let you believe things in certainly. So if he's seeing Prospero alive, he probably does not believe it because of his previous experiences on the island. "Welcome, my friends all." He's welcoming the entire royal party, aside to Sebastian and Antonio. So nobody else, no other characters can listen to this except the audience, Antonio and Sebastian. Alonso, Gonzalo, other courtiers are not able to listen to this conversation. "But you, my brace of lords, my pair of lords," two of them, Antonio and Sebastian, were I so minded simply means if I wished, I here could pluck his highness's frown upon you. I could here make your highness, meaning the king, Alonso, frown upon you, be angry with you. How? By telling him about the conspiracy that they had hatched of killing Alonso and Gonzalo. So he says, "I know of what you had planned. If I wish over here, I can tell this to the king and he will be angry and probably you both will be punished and justify you traitors. You both will be labeled as traitors. Probably not even, they will not even be allowed to go back to Milan and Naples." But he says, "I do not wish to do it now. At this time, I will tell no tales. So at this time, I will choose not to tell any tales of your conspiracy to Alonso." Sebastian aside, again, nobody else can hear except the audience and Antonio. "The devil speaks in him. He speaks like a devil." Sebastian is scared. Unlike Antonio, Sebastian was scared. He had his own conscience. So he says, "Is the devil speaking through Prospero? How did Prospero get to know of this conspiracy?" So Prospero, of course, heard this and says, "No, it's not the devil who has heard him. It is Prospero through his magic who had heard him." Okay, and he says, "No, for you, most wicked sir, whom to call brother." Now he turns towards Antonio and says, "You are a wicked sir." He addresses him as wicked sir. "Whom to call brother would even infect my mouth." He's disgusted by Antonio's behavior and he says, "To call you my brother would infect my mouth. I do forgive thy rankest fall." So even if it is disgusting to think and call you my brother, I choose to forgive you. And your rankest fault, the most heinous crime, the most severe crime that you've committed against me, I am ready to forgive that, all of them, and require my dukedom of thee. Now all I need from you is my dukedom, which perforce I know thou must restore, which I know forcefully you will have to give it back to me. Antonio probably wouldn't want to do that in spite of suffering. We know that he was not guilty, so he would have not been willing to give his island back, his dukedom back. But Prospero says, I will restore it, I will take it from you. Olonzo, if thou beest Prospero, give us particulars of thy preservation. So, if you truly are Prospero, give us the details of how you survived, how did you reach the island, how thou hast met us here, how did you meet us here, how did we reach here, who 3 hours since were wrecked upon this shore. We were wrecked near this shore before 3 hours, where I have lost how sharp the point of this remembrance is. So he suddenly remembers again the loss of his son. He says, on this island, on this shore, in the wreck, I have lost, and that loss is sharp remembrance, is going to be in my memory forever. My dear son, Ferdinand. I've lost my dear son, Ferdinand. So Prospero says, I am woo for it, sir. I'm sorry for it, sir. Alonso, irreparable is the loss, and patience says it is past her cure. So the loss that I have suffered is irreparable, and patience herself, it's personification here because patience is seen as a woman, and patience says it is past her cure. Even patience now gives up, cannot cure me of my restlessness. So Alonso can no more be patient. He does not think that this pain, he shall ever overcome this pain. So he says, patience also has given up. To which Prospero says, I rather think you have not sought her help. So he says, I think you have not really taken her help. Her refers to patience. So I think you have not taken her help properly. Well, he says this because he knows that Ferdinand is alive, of whose soft grace for the like loss I have her sovereign aid, and rest myself content. So he says, you have probably not taken the help of patience very well, because patience is a very giving woman whose soft grace, patient is a very graceful woman, is a very giving, generous woman. If you ask for her help, she will give it to you, because I too have suffered a loss, for the like loss. I have a similar loss. I have her sovereign aid, but patience has given me lot of help to overcome, to deal with this patience. So he says, I too have suffered a similar loss, but I am content, I am happy, and I am satisfied because patience has been very generous with me. To which Alonso says, you, the like loss? How come did you suffer a similar loss? So Prospero says, as great to me as late. Very great, it's a great loss to me, and it has happened to me lately, recently. And supportable. Supportable, make it bearable. To make it bearable, to make the dear loss, have I means much weaker. So he says, even I cannot deal with such a loss. I don't have means to deal with such a loss. Which loss is he talking about? He's talking about losing his daughter, not in terms of death, but losing his daughter in terms of he's given away his daughter now to Ferdinand in marriage. And supportable, to make the dear loss. It's a dear loss, it's a deep loss. Have I means much weaker than you may call to comfort you. My loss is greater than your loss. He's saying this because he knows Ferdinand is alive, and he says, your loss is not great because you're soon going to get a son, your son, and a daughter. But my loss is a dear loss. Then you may call to comfort you, for I have lost my daughter. So I have lost my daughter, but your loss is not going to be that great a loss. Alonso says, a daughter? Oh heavens, that they were living both in Naples. He says, you have also lost your daughter? How I wish, he says, I wish, I pray to heavens that both of them, your daughter and my son, were happy and alive, and then I would have made them the king and queen of Naples. So he doesn't know what Prospero was hinting at, but he says, if they were alive, I would have made them the king and queen there, the king and queen there. That they were, I wish myself were murdered in that oozy bed. So he says, I wish they were alive and the king and queen of Naples. I would die instead of them. So he says, I wish myself were murdered, buried in that oozy bed, in the ocean bed. Instead of Ferdinand being dead and drowned, I would have died. And I wish Ferdinand and your daughter, if they were alive, I would have made them the king and queen of Naples. I wish myself were murdered in that oozy bed where my son lies. I wish I were dead instead of my son, and I would lie at the muddy bed instead of my son. Where did you lose your daughter? He's asking him, where did you lose your daughter? Because according to Alonso, he thinks Prospero too uh, has lost his daughter in terms of daughter's death, but of course it refers to Prospero, saying that he has lost his daughter in marriage. He's given his daughter in marriage. So we will stop here and we will see what happens next when Alonso is going to discover that Ferdinand was alive and was in love with Miranda.